Hi friends, it's Miracle, and today I'm gonna bring you a wrap-up of all the books I read in the first 4 months of 2021. I feel like my reading has been slowly picking up this year, and I've already read so many great books, and I'm loving it. In the first 4 months, I read in total of 17 books, including I think 2 books I read in the first 2 months, so the following 15 I read in March and April, including 6 books I read for the first round of BOOKTUBE prize, which I already have a separate wrap-up video. I'll link it down below. The first book I read this year was A Pure Heart by Roger Hasseb. The detailed review has been made. I'll link it down below as well, but I'll briefly talk about it here because it's been a while. This is a book started with Rose, who's an Egyptologist who was born and raised in Egypt and moved to the US and married a US husband. And one day her little sister died back in Egypt and left so many artifacts for Rose to find out and a mystery to solve. This is a story about grief set in post-Arab Spring movement. So to me, as a reader who doesn't really know a lot about Arab Spring, the more important and more attractive part compared to the grieving part is to read about how the political environment affected local people, how people's mind can be shifted by their political sides and the expectations and experiences. And also because Rose is an immigrant who moved to the US after she became an adult, so personally, I connected a lot with her thoughts about homeland and the nostalgia he developed over the years. But this book has one flaw I think I need to point out. It follows 3 narrations, but one of them is pretty weak compared to the other 2. Actually, it took me a while to figure out, oh, this person is also part of the narration. So I think that's the part I didn't really enjoy, but nonetheless, I still love this book a lot, and I would recommend it to anybody who's interested to read something related to the current Egyptian political culture, and also don't mind some sad tone in their books, and also like some mystery elements. The second book I finished this year was Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This is a fantastic memoir, and I love it so much. I feel like everybody should read it if you're interested in the subject matter. Chanel Miller was sexually assaulted on campus of Stanford University in 2015, and after that she published a letter and was known by Emily Doe for the longest time on media until she wrote this book and reclaimed her identity. This book shows you everything that is wrong in the current rape justice system. Chanel Miller wrote about everything she experienced after the attack step by step and really shows you how she has to relive the trauma over and over again, how she has to live through the perfect victim myth and also take all the blaming as a victim. And it also shows you how hard to get justice. Even though she had 2 witnesses who saw the sexual assault happen and they stopped the attacker and called the police and even they went to testify on court. Besides the subject matter, I also loved her writing. She's very articulate and logical. Because the whole thing is happened in Stanford University, so actually I lived pretty close to that area, so every street that she wrote, I can picture a vivid picture in my head. I listened to this book on audio, but then I got this physical copy. I want to reread it sooner rather than later. And then I read 2 lovely graphic memoirs from the same series called The Arab of the Future by Riyad Sattouf, translated by Sam Taylor from French. And because they are pretty heavy, so I'm gonna be only holding one. These graphic memoirs are so lovely. Each of them covered a couple years in the author's childhood when his family was following his father's career, living in the different countries in Middle East after his father graduated from a doctorate degree in France and became a young professor. I love how in this series, the author captured the culture conflict between 2 of his cultures from a child's eye. His father, who was born and raised in Syria, is very used to the local culture and how the local kids grew up, and he has this idea of how his son should be a man in Syria and how his son should learn about the local cultures, and he doesn't mind the kind of dangerous game played among kids from time to time and sometimes even including animal abuse. And his mom, who is a modest French woman, is trying her best to adapt it into this culture and learn new things, but we can often feel like his mom is not very comfortable with some of the things that she saw. But we can tell she's trying her best to learn. And the author also showed us how politics works in his childhood, how the politics impact on not only the adults but the children, and what the changes he has to make in his mind in order to adapt it into this environment with his classmates and teachers. The tone of the book is light and funny, but it's actually tackling some pretty heavy topics. I'm mostly curious about how the author's dad is going to be in the following books because he is getting more and more conservative. Also, the education that the author got when he's little is bizarre to me as well. I have the following 2 books in the series, and I think there's 3 more which is under translation or under writing by the author, and I can't wait to continue reading. Then I read The Iliac Christ by Cristina Rivera Garza, translated by Sarah Booker. This is, I would like to say, magical realism novel set in a fictional world, fictional city, where a doctor is living on the edge of the shore by the sea, and he's living alone. But one stormy night, 2 unexpected guests showed up at his house and things happened. I don't want to get into the plot of the book a lot because I think the less we know about it, the better. But this is a very atmospheric book, and the environmental description of the book is on point and give you a thrill. But in the meantime, I think reading this book as an English reader, we missed out a lot on the discussion about identities and genders. Because in the original language of this novel, which is Spanish, a large portion of this novel was playing around using the gender in Spanish words. For example, they have feminine and masculine in the words. And whenever the gender of the narrator was shifting, the different gender of words started to blend in with each other. And paired with the blurry image of the fictional city, it actually indicates the truth or false in this book. But of course, as English readers, we don't really have genders in English words, so we don't really get to experience and analyze this book that deep by this way. I just was really enjoy this peculiar story and the atmosphere in it. Next, I read a Japanese mystery short story collection translated into Chinese called 怪人们. It means the weirdos in English. It's by Keigo Higashino. And my version was translated into traditional Chinese by Li Yanhua. Keigo Higashino is one of the most popular mystery writers in Japan, I would say, and this is one of his earlier works before he developed his style of blending in mystery with heavy analysis on humanity and society. So each one of the stories is pretty light and funny, and focused on twists and turns and surprising the readers. It actually reminded me a lot of the stories I read from Hitchcock when I was small, where you can never tell the ending until the very last page. So I really enjoyed it, and I think it's a very relaxing read. Then I read Men Explain Things to Me by Rebecca Sonnet. This is a short nonfiction book where the author talks about mansplaining, women silencing, and discuss about sexism on a society scale. And to my surprise, a large portion of this book was actually talking about Virginia Woolf and how her work influenced the writer as a woman and also a writer. I agree with a lot of the idea that the author addressed about feminism, and I also agree that the violence against women have long existed in our society from the time of Virginia Woolf to today, and nothing really have changed that much in the recent 100 years. And also this book served as a great refresh for me and a reminder for daily practice. But I'm also happy to see that reading this book wasn't a really mind-blowing experience for me compared to as if I read it a couple years ago. That makes me realize how much I have grown as a feminist and how much I have changed in my thinking process on social issues in a good way. Next, I read another Japanese novel translated into Chinese by Kazunaki Takano called 消失的13级台阶. Translated into English as The Disappearing 13th Steps or The Disappearing 13th Stairs. and my version was translated into simplified Chinese by Zhao Jianxun. This book is the winner of the Edogawa Lambo Prize in Japan in 2001, which is the highest prize of mystery novels in Japan. And it has been translated into German also, but I don't think it has an English translation yet. The story followed a death penalty executioner in Japan and a prisoner who has been recently released. For some reason, they got together and started to investigate this case that happened like years ago. The mystery elements or the mystery structure of this book is amazing. Just when you feel like you have unfolded a corner of the mystery, you actually discover this new entire page. It's kind of like the continuous tissue box where you're pulling from the box, but the new one just came more and more. It's a page turner, and I just cannot put it down. Equally amazing in this book is the discussion about death penalty. As I said before, one of the protagonists is an executioner of death penalty, so through his eyes, we see a lot of great debate. What's the goal of death penalty? Is that really helpful for the society? Is that really necessary for death penalty to be executed if the family of the victim decided to forgive the prisoner? Death penalty is a very complicated and a very heavy topic to discuss about. As a novel, the author didn't really give us any conclusion, but I enjoyed reading it from different angles. And this is a book that I kept thinking about after I read it, so I wish it will come up with an English translation so it can reach to more audience. Next, I listened to the audiobook of Brave by Rose McGowan. Rose McGowan is one of the actresses who stood up in the Me Too movement and alleged that Harvey Weinstein has raped her when she's younger. And she spoke up for the sexual assault in the acting industry and the rape culture. In this memoir, she dissects her life and talking about her experiences growing up in a cult and how she had to escape from her abused parents in order to live and make a living as an actor. And her experiences are extremely brutal, and on top of that, her honest writing makes the whole book very raw and powerful. A lot of the things that she experienced is very hard for me to imagine. Almost her entire life is a showcase of misogyny in our society. In this book, it echoes and echoes about how women has been mistreated and how boys will be boys even when they're like 30, 40, 50 years old, but a girl become a woman at the age of 8. I can feel her anger throughout the narrations of the book and her brave, as the title suggested. Then I read Dark Secrets by Jorth and Drusenfeld, translated by Marlene Delargy. This is the first book in a crime mystery series in Sweden called the Sebastian Bergman series. Our protagonist, Sebastian Bergman, is a psychologist who used to work with the police, but he left this job years ago. Recently, his mom passed away and he went back to the town that his mom lived and found out that his older colleagues are working on a case in that town. So he kind of squeezed himself into the investigation where the case is about a teenage boy who has been brutally murdered and abandoned in a pond in the wood. I really enjoyed the story and I like how the mystery was revealing layer by layer, and the pacing of the book really gave me the vibe of a crime TV show where you actually get to know a little bit of each characters. Although we have a protagonist, but the story is actually about everyone and it takes turns to tell you a little bit chapters of each character's life and how almost all of their lives are messed up, which I really enjoy reading for some reason. So overall, I really enjoyed this book, and despite it's a crime novel, it's actually pretty relaxing, and I can't wait to read about the second one and see how the character's life picking up. Lastly, I read Tell Me How It Ends, an essay in 40 questions by Valeria Lasili. This is a nonfiction about the author's experiences and her thoughts being an interpreter for the undocumented children who mostly from Central America and crossed Mexico and seeking for shelters in the United States, but also facing deportation at any moment. I started this book a little bit struggling because I had read a novel that inspired by the author's same experiences called Lost Children Archive, and I did not like that novel at all, mostly because the setting of the novel was in a very boring, very boring road trip, And this book started with that road trip, and it reminded me so much of the boredom of that novel. So I was really struggling from the beginning. But I'm glad I kept reading it, because after the first 10%, everything started to picking up. The author started to write about her experiences as the interpreter and the things that she observed when she was interpreting for the undocumented children, the danger they faced back home, the journey they took across different borders, and the legal process that affect their day-to-day life. My eyes were opened by this book for many things. One example being that the author actually showed us how the problem that the children in Central America facing can be extended to or even created by the communities, some of the communities in the US. So even though they came to the US and settled down a new life, some of the trauma still followed them, or some of these gangsters that they had back in home still have community in the US and threatened them. I'm so glad I went through the not very interesting opening and kept reading this book. And eventually I gave this book 4.5 out of 5 stars. And that's all the books I have for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and let me know if any of the books have caught your eyes, or what have you been reading lately. Say hi in the comment section down below, and thumbs up to this video if you liked it. Stay healthy, happy reading. I'll see you in my next bookish video. Bye!